off the pad and it triggers everybody in the world. Now then, crew, and welcome back to the Andy Mechanic YouTube channel. And this is episode 2 in the series of getting the Honda CB750 K2 variant back through compliance here in New Zealand and on the road. This belongs to a really good friend of mine, Alan. And Alan's had this bike for many, many years and it's become deregistered. That means that essentially the number plate doesn't exist anymore. Physically it does, but on the computer system here in New Zealand, it no longer is attached to this particular vehicle. Now, the motorcycle is in generally very, very good condition. Alan has a number of bikes that he looks after extremely well. And on this video, we need to go through the brake checks. So we need to basically measure up the front brake and inspect the rear drum brake as well, to make sure that everything is within manufacturer's specifications. So, why not join me? Let's take a look. Here we go. Right, to perform the rear brake inspection, we're going to need to remove the rear wheel. Now, I've taken the exhaust off this bike just to give us a bit more room and to aid the camera work, so you can actually see what's going on. You don't have to remove the exhausts, which is pretty cool. I thought you did to start off with, but you don't. Right, now we need to get the chain off, so we're going to slacken off these unless they'll... Sometimes you can tip them upwards. And, nope, not on this one. Right. 13, I think it will be. Yes, everything's a 13 mil on this thing. Right, so we'll slacken that off. Surprised you can't tilt that up though, but obviously not. But we'll just take those out, it'll be easier. Fantastic. Right, we'll get the chain off. So, that's really tight. Let me get my magic hammer. Oh, that's a bit tight, is that? That's no good. And again, to make things easier, I'm just going to whip the chain guard out. Get rid of that. That one. 2. Is that all of them? It is. Right, we just tap that upwards. There we go. There we go. Now we can take these pieces out now, and you're going to see what's going to happen. The axle can now slide straight out of the back of the swing arm. Once we get the chain off, of course. What a neat system. I like this, the fact that you can get the wheel out without taking the exhaust off. Right, okay, so now we can get that tyre, get the wheel a bit further forward, and we should be able to flick that chain off the sprocket. It's at times like this that you wish you'd worn some gloves. Right, there we go. Perfect. There we go. Hopefully, yeah, there we go. Let me get the drum out. Sort the job. Get rid of that. Ah, now look, note the washer. Very important. Very important that goes back in there again. Otherwise, you'll have problems with your bearings. Okay, note the second washer. Very important. Oh, wrong way. There we go. I'll give that a bit of a grease later on. Push drive system looks pretty solid. That's not going to come out, so we'll leave that alone. Right, to the bench. Oh man, it's amazing how heavy these old wheels are. Right, we're going to be on this bench. That's not very stable, is it? Let me get some blocks of wood. That's better. Right. Ooh, there's a bit of a lip. Fingers crossed we're within spec. Right, vernier calipers required. Right. Okay, so unfortunately my vernier calipers are not big enough to do this brake drum. It's about 180 millimeters across. This only goes to 150. You can get larger ones of these for specifically this task. This is all I have, so that's no good to me today. So quick knock up, real rudimentary. We've got a couple of steel bars, some little brackets that I had in my drawer clamped to it, and a bolt. So we can drop that in there and just adjust it until it's a nice snug fit, not too tight, just rubbing on the surface of the drum. So we'll do that. And hopefully my little contraption is going to do the trick. Maybe one day I'll buy the right tools for the job, eh? It's not often you have to do this anymore, so zero cost. Fraction more. There we go. Okay, how does that fare around this side? You've got to make sure you're going right across the centre of the drum. That's critical, otherwise you'll get the wrong measurement. Feels pretty good there. Just swing it around, do this side. Yeah, we're just to say rubbing on the surface of the drum now. There we go. Right, let's give that a measure, see where we're at. Okay, so we said the spec is 183 is the maximum diameter of the drum, and the points of this device that we're touching the sides were obviously the widest point, which is right on this edge here. So I should do that. I'll do it upside down because I can feel when the ruler's lined up with that at that end. I can see a lot better at this end. And that bolt's keeping it all in the right place for us, which is good. And I measure that at 182 millimeters. Just double check. It's always good to double check. Oh no, we're better than that. Hang on. Get it lined up at that end. 181 I'll go with. So we're well underneath, well under the actual wear limit of 183. So that's a pass. Alan would be really, really happy about that because these hubs would be very hard to find if this was worn out. Cool. Okay, right, let's move on and do the rear brake shoes and do a measurement on those. Right, so we get rid of this. Oh, jeez, they're so heavy. Surprisingly heavy for not a very large wheel. Okay, so the brake shoes. Now the minimum wear limit on these, or minimum thickness of the material, is 2 millimeters according to Honda. Now looking at it, it looks fine. And of course it's a lot easier changing brake shoes than it is to change the whole drum. So all we need to do now is just go around, look for the thinnest point, which is about there on this one. There we go. I would say that's about 3.2, 3.3 millimeters on that shoe. You've got to measure both because sometimes they wear a bit unevenly. And you can just to say get the edge on the aluminium. There's a bit of a step which is quite handy. And then you can just feel when it's the right height. Yeah, that one's about 3.4. So we're all good there. The rear brake shoes are again within spec. Obviously need a bit of a clean up, but they're looking pretty good. Yeah, I'll go with that. Perfect. Look at that, a handy little tool. Sure, these were a little bit long. I could have made it smaller, but it was a 2-minute job to throw this together and to allow me to take a reasonably accurate measurement. You know, as long as we're well under 183, I'm happy with it. If the result had been like 182.7, then realistically I would have had to get a more accurate measuring device to make sure we're definitely under the 183 wear limit. But, you know, not bad. Cool. Okay, right. So basically the brake drum, 183 millimeters. We were at 181, I think it was. So we're well underneath on the spec on there. As regards the brake shoe thickness, the material minimum thickness, 2 millimeters is the limit. We're at 3.2 and 3.4 respectively. Again, a pass. So now we can move to the front end of the bike, and we've got a couple of things to do. We've got to measure the brake disc thickness, and the minimum is 5.5 millimeters thick. Well, we can use the verniers for that. And the run out, so we used to use a DTI, is 0.3 millimeters. So let's go and do the brake disc thickness first. Oh, we got heaps of material left. Almost 6.8 millimeters. So there's no need, I think, to measure any further around the brake disc. Sometimes it's good to know if there's any variation in thickness. That's 6.68. But realistically, you really want a micrometer with the pointed anvils to measure it correctly, really. But then again, if the disc is worn and it's got grooves in there, then of course you're going to have problems again. But this is nice and smooth, so we've got 6.7. Yeah, 6.7. This is actually looking really good. Yeah, 6.7. Cool. Okay, happy with that. 6.7 millimeters is the thickness. The minimum wear limit is 5.5 millimeters. So this brake disc has got a long way to go. Obviously, it can't be the original brake disc, surely. It's a fair chunk, isn't it? Quite a lot more heavy duty than you get on the modern bikes. Now, we've done the brake disc thickness check, and it's easily a pass. It's well within specs. That front brake disc is hardly worn. Now, to do the run out check using the DTI, I have to be able to rotate the front wheel. And to do that, I've got to fit the rear wheel and turn the bike around in the hoist. So let me get on with that. And here's a word from Tool Girl Holly.
Hey guys, it's Tool Girl Holly here. Now's the time to grab your anti-mechanic mug. You can find that on the Zazzle website, just up the top here. Once you do, you can take a selfie with it and send it to antimechanic@live.co.uk. That'll throw you in the draw to win some really cool stuff, including Forge Gear, Ting Tools, and the Anti-Mechanic personalised jacket. Draw will be drawn on December 2020. Signing off, Tool Girl Holly.
Well, while I'm doing the job, you may as well get to see. This is the final drive adjustment, the rear chain adjustment. And at the moment, as you can see, it's way, way too slack. Not good. Not good at all. It isn't that badly worn, actually. It's pretty good. Okay, so to do the adjustment, we need to do the adjustment evenly on both sides. So we're just going to wind that up. Don't want to get it too tight first. We need to bring the other side in as well. So we're just before the first mark at the moment. There we go, that's equal both sides. Still a little bit slack. I've set my verniers to a 15mm gap. The spec is between 10 and 20mm of chain movement in the middle of the chain. So as we can see, that's way more than we've got on the vernier. So we'll just give it another little tweak. 1/2 turn on there. 1/2 turn on there. And we are just forward of the mark. And just forward of the mark this side. Let's see where we're at. Feels a lot better now. And I would say middle of the chain is just slightly forward of the rear pillion mount for the foot peg. Yeah, I'd go with that. Only one tiny, tiny movement. Right, let's give that a go. Don't want it too slack, but if you have it over tight, it can damage the bearing on the output shaft of the gearbox. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'm happy. It's actually about 20mm. It's at the moment. Coolio. Right, once that's done, we can lock everything off, tighten these up, and we can just also tighten up the lock nuts on here. So make sure that these don't move again. So we'll just give that a little tweak. That's that one. Cool, that's the other side done. Great stuff. Now, next job is to make sure that that's pulled all the way forward. The rear wheel is tight against these adjusters before we tighten up the main spindle. So to do that, just get a 3/8 extension bar, pretty easy. They usually drop straight in between the teeth on the chain. Get it tensioned up, and then you can tighten up the rear nut. Now, I couldn't actually find a torque setting for this nut in the service manual, but obviously it is partly dependent on lining up the split pin holes. That one is bang on. Coolio, obviously do a final check of the chain adjustment and the slack before you carry on. That actually feels a little bit slack to me, so I might give it a little tweak, and then we'll get finished off. But make sure you put this nut back on here with the bolt for the stay for the brake plate, and that needs a split pin in it, as does this one. And of course, you've got the rear brake rod to refit as well and adjust. Easy. Don't forget to tighten these up, which I nearly did. Thanks. There we go. That's that one. Cool, yeah? Done. Now, measuring the runout on a brake disc requires the use of a dial test indicator. And this is the one from Teng that I'll be using there, look. I only got this a few weeks ago. And also, it's quite difficult sometimes to set it up. The indicator itself must be mounted off the motorcycle itself. You can't mount it off the workbench because, of course, you've got the movement of the bike to take into consideration, and that's a variable that you can't really account for, and it makes a mockery of the inspection. So you've got to mount it off the forks of the bike somehow if it's the front brake disc. So I'll show you what I've done, and let's take a reading and see if it's going to be a pass or a fail. Here we go. So to get around this particular issue and get a stable mount for the DTI, I've got a big heavy steel plate that's currently clamped to the rear of the front caliper mount on the fork, and just steadied by the mudguard. This is quite a rigid mudguard, being steel, so it's not really a problem. If I give it a wiggle, you'll see on the DTI the actual needle doesn't really move too much. I've got to be quite forceful, so rotating the wheel around shouldn't really affect that side of things. Okay, I'm going to get you set up nice and close so you can take a reading as I rotate the wheel. Now, first things first, let's just put a mark on the disc so we know we've gone all the way around. So we'll just put a little pen mark on there, and that gives us a good start finish point, doesn't it? Great stuff. Well, the basics of setting up your DTI is you've got to make damn sure that the actual contact onto the brake disc surface is at 90 degrees to the disc itself, perpendicular to. And then once you've got it all set up, you need to make sure that there's movement both in and out. And if you see there, look, as I move it, we've got that. So I'll just rotate this to the 0 mark. There we go, look. Okay. Now, each of these very small increments is 0.01 millimeters. See the little scale just down there. Sorry it's upside down to you, but that's what it is, 0.01. So every 10 is 0.1 of a millimeter. Now, the specification for this is 0.3 millimeters of allowable runout to a maximum. So let's just see where we go. We're going to start to rotate the disc, and bearing in mind that every single small increment is 0.01 millimeters. So we're going to need quite a large sweep for it to be a fail. Okay, here we go. So we're just coming up to, that's 0.02 millimeters. Going back down. Okay. So that's about 0.05 so far. We've got about 2.02 millimeters on this side, and 0.03 millimeters on this side of the scale. Oh, slightly more, so we're up to 0.06, 0.07. Coming back now. I tell you what, we've been around quite a couple of times now, but let's just keep going. Yeah, so 0.03 on this side, and then the maximum on the other side, the throw, is about 0.03 as well. So you can see we are well within specification. If it was equidistant, we'd have to go, 30 of those small increments to be outside spec. So example, from here all the way across to over here. But any 30 will be a fail. But that, just giving it a quick spin, you can see that that's well within specification. There is some run out, but it's not a lot. Great job. It's a pass. Right, so we can disassemble all this now. Don't need that anymore. Sorry, Alan. Had to be done there. Easy. No marks. Now, there is one more bit that I want to show you, but this is the contents from the service manual covering the brakes. And you don't get a normal brake pad thickness, minimum thickness, for the brake pads on this particular bike. Honda give us a very different measurement, and I just thought I'd show you the diagram first. So you can see on here we've got the caliper, and then we've got a view of the hub and the caliper side on. And somewhere in the text, if I can find it for you, where are they at? Now that's a really good picture. That one there, let's bring it up a little bit. One thing that concerns me, and we'll see it a bit later on in the video, is the wear that's occurred on that pivot. And I'll show you that in a second. But first of all, I just want to cover how to measure the brake pad wear. This covers, I'll just do it slowly, so you can always pause the video if you need any of this. It shows you how to remove and strip down the caliper and the master cylinder on the handlebars. Taking some measurements there, look. Got to keep stopping it, otherwise you won't be able to read it. Tells you about the reassembly here, using silicone sealing grease. Now, where did I read about the brake pads? Let me try and find that for you. It's not the easiest manual to... So it tells you all about brake caliper adjustment, which is all there, look. And then it jumps across to the rear brake. Fantastic. So it's somewhere in here. I read somewhere it was 2 millimeters, 1.5 to 2. See if I can scan for that. It took me ages to find it the first time. Here we go, look. Inspection, brake pads, brake friction pads. If the clearance between the front of the caliper and the brake disc face becomes more than 1.5 to 2 millimeters, one or the other, friction pads must be replaced. Okay, so let's go and take that measurement and see what it is. Okay, so my interpretation of that, because there's no diagram to support this, this is the front face of the caliper, and this is the face of the disc, and the distance we're looking to measure is this gap here. And it said if it's anything less, if it gets below 1.5 to 2 millimeters, then it's an indication that the brake pad is worn out. So we need to measure this gap. It looks pretty good, but we'll go and get the verniers and we'll do a measurement. Okay, so again, just a nice close-up for you. We've got the disc surface here. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Dear, oh dear. and we've got the front face of the caliper. So I think what Honda's saying is this gap across here. If I'm wrong, tell me in the comments, because I'm pretty sure, well, I think I'm right. I can't imagine what other measurement that's going to be. Right, so I've just reset the verniers. I'm just going to bring that down till it looks, I'm going to use the camera for this because you've got a far better angle than I have. There we go, that looks about right. What have we got? Well, get the focus going. I can't cope, it's too close. Maybe you can see it down there, look, hang on. Too close, off camera. There you go, 4.48 millimeters. So there's plenty of life left in those brake pads according to the measurement that Honda give us in their specifications. Perfect. Now, one of my main concerns, even though everything so far has been a pass, like I showed you on that diagram, there's a pivot just back here behind the fork. And my main concern is the amount of movement on this caliper, on the actual pivot itself. Got a tremendous amount of movement there. And if I spin the front wheel and apply the brake, you'll see that ride up. So my question is, how much movement is too much movement? Because there's nothing in the service manual to give us any kind of measurements. So for you guys, this video is going to go out shortly. Tell me, I could do with your advice on this, because I just don't know. This to me personally feels really bad. There's quite a lot of movement there. And I think it's going to need some new bushes in that pivot point. I wouldn't be happy riding around with a brake like that, to be honest. Right then, crew, we've done it. We've done all the measurements. So to quickly run through, we'll start off with a summary on the rear drum brake, which is the first one that we did. And the maximum diameter that's permissible of that drum brake is 183 millimeters, and we got a reading of 181. Now, I appreciate there are more accurate ways of doing that measurement. Haven't got that available today, unfortunately, but the reading that we got was way under 2 millimeters under the maximum spec limit. So I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to record down 181 millimeters for the current drum diameter. As regards the brake shoe friction material thickness, the minimum permissible is 2 millimeters, and we got 3.2 and 3.4 respectively. So that is a pass. The rear brake is good to go. No work required other than just to service it, give it a bit of a clean up, get rid of a bit of that rust. Now, the front brake, slightly more involved with the front. The minimum thickness on the brake disc, according to Honda's service manual, is 5.5 millimeters. We got, near as damn it, 6.7 millimeters all the way around that disc. As regards the run out, which is a really critical measurement and has to be done accurately, that's why I used a DTI and took my time to set it all up properly, with a nice fixed mounting off the fork, with hardly any movement at all. And you could see that the needle was very accurate when it was moving nice and slowly. Even the movement of the wheel, when I was moving the wheel, didn't really cause any kind of sudden jarring of the needle. So the minimum, the maximum permitted run out is 0.3 of a millimeter, which is quite a bit. We got a reading on or around 0.07 millimeters of run out. Again, well within spec, so that is definitely a pass. Now, the brake pad wear, Honda don't give us a specific wear thickness for the pads. This is probably because you'd have to disassemble the whole brake caliper to be able to measure them, because they're quite hidden. They've given us that measurement between the caliper body and the disc face surface. Anything really below 2 millimeters is a problem, and it should get new brake pads. We got a measurement of 4.43 millimeters. That sort of indicates to me that the brake pads in there are pretty new. So again, that is well and truly a pass. We're way away from the minimum 2 millimeters. What does concern me, however, and there is no specifications that I can find in the service manual relating to this, is in my opinion, the excessive wear, or certainly excessive movement of that caliper in the vertical motion. When you apply the brake, the caliper rides upon the disc quite considerably, and that's all down to the fact that there's wear in that pivot, and I showed you the diagram on the screen. So I'm going to get in contact with my good friend Stu down in Invercargill. He's a service manager down there for a very well-known motorcycle shop, and I'm going to show him this video, get him to watch the video and get his opinion of the amount of movement on that pivot. And I'll also, as a plan B, I'm going to be looking into seeing if we can get new bushes from Honda for that pivot. It might be that Honda only supply the whole pivot assembly as one piece, and given the age of the bike, probably no longer available and probably very expensive. If it does require those bushes replacing, then may well be that I need to get on the lathe and make some new ones. Okay, crew, well, this is the end of episode 2 in the CB750 K2 series, and there'll be another video out very soon. Series, man, is it episode 2 or episode 3? Episode 2. It is. Honestly, so busy, I forget. Okay, watch out for episode 3. And on that one, we're going to be looking at why number 2 cylinder is a little bit on the lazy side. It doesn't want to fire up when you first start the bike from cold. It only comes into play and starts, igniting the fuel and contributing towards the engine's output once the engine has warmed up. So we're doing things like compression tests and other bits and pieces in that video. All right, chaps. Well, if you enjoyed the video, why not click on the subscribe button, which is actually on this side, I think. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere up there. I forget. Click on the subscribe button, and our friends at YouTube will send you a notification. If you ring the bell, they'll send you an email as and when I upload any new videos. You'll also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Feel free to communicate through any of those portals. There's also a Patreon page, and you can drop onto that, read all about the history of the channel and why it came to be, all the various tool girls that have joined me on the show over the years. There's lots of photos to download. There's some tiers that you can join if you want. And, well, become a patron and make a donation should you see fit. You can also make a donation through PayPal, and I'll put just use my email address, which is in the description, as the PayPal payment email address, if that makes sense. Okay, crew, well, that's about it. Until next time, see you around. Cheers, over and out. And we get the flip again.
Oh!
Yes!